Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss the TV miniseries starring Colin Farrell, Kristen Milioti, Renzi Felix, Deirdre O'Connell, Carmen Yogo, Theo Rossi, and Clancy Brown, directed by Craig Zobel, Kevin Bray, Helen Shaver, and Jennifer Getzinger. Now, I am kind of excited to talk about this, even though it's going to be a little bit long. I am excited for it, so let's just get straight into this, as this is going to be a lead up to the Batman Part 2, which I don't know when that's filming, but it's going to be filming anytime soon. Let's begin. We recap the events of the Batman when the Riddler blows up Gotham City line, and Carmine Falcone is dead, and his son Alberto is about to take over the mob business of Gotham, while Oswald Cobb, or Oz for short, returned by an unrecognizable Colin Farrell from the Batman, hears about it on the news as he breaks something on the wall and looks up a file of the Falcone family. And Alberto comes in and points a gun at Oz, and Oz talks himself out of the situation, as he does throughout this miniseries. And they have a drink together and talk about his father, and wears a ring that belongs to Salvatore Maroni, played later by Clancy Brown. And the acting in this is good, so good by everyone. Oz shoots Alberto dead after mocking Oz, who knows about his plan to take over Gotham, and he laughs about it and buried Alberto, and goes to the car and finds some kids trying to steal Oz's car, and he bumps into Victor Aguilar, played by Renzi Felix, and makes him his assistant for now, as he has a hard time speaking, and he drives Oz around, and that is intense and a great way to introduce a character like Victor. And I like the characters thus far in this world of Matt Reeves' The Batman universe. They go in a building where they visit Eve Carlo, played by Carmen Yogo, for a favor to go get a bite to eat, and buried the body of Alberto in a car where no one can find him in a scrapyard. And Oz makes Victor smoke a cigar, and Victor becomes his assistant. And the shots were great, but there were times the camera was shaking a tad bit. When they do shake it, I'm like, hold the fucking camera still, please. Oz takes off his socks, and as I look at his feet, I'm thinking his toes are completely like a penguin. And he goes to work for Victor, while gets a call. He gets called in from the Falcone family, Oz does, and the dialogue is stunning. Oz goes in a house of the Falcone family and has a meeting with Johnny Vitti, and they plan on shutting down the plant of a much farther place until Carmine Falcone's daughter, Sophia Falcone, played in a breakout performance by Kristen Milioti, something like that. I forget how you say it. Please forgive me. Enters the room and asks Oz about Alberto, and Sophia invites Oz to a place to eat, while Oz feels a little nervous as she just got out of Arkham Asylum, because she was a killer. That will be probably explained a little bit later as her side of the story, saying he's always been an asshole. And that's the first thing he said that was the truth, because he's a Batman villain. Oz takes the subway to another car, and when he starts it plays the song 925, but he takes the CD out as he drives to his mother's place, and his mother, Frances Cobb, played by Deirdre O'Connell, as he makes her take her medicine, and Oz confesses to her he shot Alberto Falcone. And Frances, after she hears the story, is she the Falcon's pussy boy? And the cinematography in this is very good to look at throughout the show. Oz needs Victor to pull through, and Victor says he can't pull it off, and drives the car and tells him to keep his phone on, and goes to Salvatore Maroni. And Oz wants to work for him, as Carmine played for them for a fool. And Oz gives his ring that was on Alberto's finger in the beginning of the show, and gives it back to Sal, as Sophia makes a choice that Oz in the fucking rain in the middle of the crowded flea market. And one guy finds him and beats the shit out of the guy. And he gets ran over by a school bus full of kids and gets knocked out and interrogated by Sophia. And I was on the edge of my seat for how intense it was. And she shoots a witness, and she says he's a good at talking his way out of things. And Sophia tortures Oz until a car is smashed on a fountain, and she finds a clue in the trunk that is Alberto's dead body in front of John Vidi's house. And Victor catches up with Oz, and Oz wants to take over the crime boss with Victor. And the episode is tremendous, as it was greatly acted by the actors. We start episode 2 with Sophia getting a visit from Alberto in Arkham Asylum, as it was a dream, and she's in the doctor's office as her psychiatrist, Dr. Julian Rush, played by Theo Rossi, and she doesn't feel safe. And we pick up with Oz coming back to Sal, well, as I'm going to call him for the rest of the show, while his family is visiting him, and he teams up with his gang, including John Viti, as they pull off a heist, and the Falcons begin to attack, and Oz goes back to being the traitor he is, and the scene was intense for damn sure. Sophia comes in the room and hears Oz arguing with the guys, and they talk about how they lost the product, as she comes up with the line where she said, "We can find more money," and Oz says Sophia should be the new kingpin of Gotham, or queenpin, or something like that. And Oz meets with Victor and walks to his apartment and have a party with Sophia, hearing about how she was let free from Arkham Asylum. And Kristen Milioti is the standout of the show, as she's the best character in my opinion. As she comes up to a detective who worked for her father and pay him with money and drugs, and her acting was tremendous. Victor meets Roxy while Oz looks up some photos, and Eve talks to him about how he puts some girls at risk, as Sophia wakes up for the day, and where she has scratches on her neck. And Oz and Victor go to Francis's place, and Oz talks to the landlord, and she's having dementia, as it gets worse, and he believes she needs to be in a nursing home, and plays some music and dances after the landlord leaves. And they go to the funeral, and I like the relationship with these characters, as they work great. The citizens of Gotham want Sophia dead for the crimes she's committed with her family, and Oz chats with Sophia about how he went to a jazz club and danced with, and Sophia has brought the killer of Alberto by the detective, while Oz, meets with Mrs. Maroney. And after the funeral service comes, and Sophia meets with the cousin Carla and her daughter Tia, as she makes it awkward while Oz and Victor are looking for a red Mercedes and walk in the Falcone house. And the after-funeral party scene is awkward, but it works for the miniseries. Luca wants to see Sophia while Victor tries to steal something from the red Mercedes, and Oz tells the victim Johnny Viti killed Alberto, and Oz stabs the victim to death and runs out before Sophia gets to the victim. And the guards look for someone with a knife in the party, as one of them is a traitor, and they find the motherfucker and shoot him dead when Sophia wanted to do it. And these scenes are well acted and intense at the same time, while Oz almost buries Victor for fucking up the mission. And Oz goes to Sophia, and she wants to take everything from them now and wants to partner with Oz. And this ending is making me think there's more intensity coming from the show. I'm going to like it quite a bit. We start episode 3 with Victor going to meet up with his girlfriend Graciela, while Victor drops something off which is a bag, and I have a conversation with his father, and they go out for election night, as they're going to watch from the roof. And Victor and Graciela have great chemistry with each other, and they see the attacks of the Riddler back in the Batman, where the streets flood with water and his parents die from the attack. And we pick up with Victor and Oz partnering up with Sophia, and he gets a phone call from Sal, and Sophia enters the apartment of Oz's and chats with Victor while she smokes a cigarette. And he walks out of the apartment, and Victor calls Graciela, and I have a feeling something is going to happen with Oz and Sophia. And I got scared, like something is up with Victor at this point. as he did something stupid. Oz picks up some shipments for Sophia as they pick up some fragile mushrooms, and of course, Victor invites Graciela to Oz's place. And they catch up, and he learns she's leaving Gotham to move to California, and the audience learn their families are dead. And I feel bad for Victor and Graciela inviting, as she invites Victor to come to California, but he can't for Oz purposes, and he doesn't know what to do about leaving to California. And he wants to reunite with his old lover, which is a nice scene for a calm down moment. Johnny talks with Sophia and tells her to go to Italy with her uncle Luca, telling her to. And Oz and Sophia go to Chinatown and meets with Link and have a threatening conversation while Victor practices what to say to Oz about him going to California, and the cops come in to harass the kid, which is reminding me of what the fuck is going on with the cops versus African Americans, and it makes me sad to see that type of bullshit. While Oz and Sophia negotiate with the mobsters, and Oz and Victor have lunch together, and the score on the in the background, was an interesting choice. Oz and Victor comes up to Tina and blackmails Johnny to fuck Tina and negotiates with Johnny as he taunts Oz until he tortures him by pulling out his tooth. And I was like, oh Jesus, that was brutal. And we move on to a club, and Victor tries to text Graciela to see him at the train station while he's a bag boy for the night until he sees his past from the Riddler attacked, and Roxy helps Victor, and the club scene was very well shot. Victor has a meltdown, and Oz comes to the restroom and finds out Graciela wants him to go to California, but he can't as Oz overreacted. Acts, I should say, and the acting in this scene is great as he steals Oz's car to go to the bus station while Oz is depressed, and Victor can't join Graciela to go to California, and that feels like a depressing downer. And Oz goes outside to Sophia, and she believes she's not the hangman, and she doesn't know where to go from there, nor does she know how to trust Oz, and suddenly gets captured while Victor goes back to the club and sees Oz and Sophia being attacked by the Maronis. And Victor crashes the car, and Oz gets in the car and drives away, and they always end up in the most intense endings ever, as it was hooking. We pick up right when the last episode ended, and Sophia learns Oz killed Alberto the hard way, and thanks to Mrs. Maroney, and we flash back to Sophia as a businesswoman, and Oz was her driver, and Summer Gleason from the press saying to Sophia she could do better by helping people not committing suicide, like the way her mother, Isabella, died. And Sophia witnesses it, and we move on to Carmine Falcone making a cameo and played briefly by Mark Strong, as he disrespects Alberto and loves Sophia to death, and as Alberto leaves, Carmine asks Sophia to run the family business after he dies, and she accepts, and she feels bad about her mother dying. And I like Mark Strong in the role of Carmine Falcone, as he's a better fit for the role than John Turturro, in my opinion, as the backstory is tragic for damn sure. Alberto accidentally spills his drink and calls Oz the Penguin, while he wants Oz to clean up his mess, and Oz drives Sophia to the reporter as she gave her the business card and looks at the suicide murders, and she thinks about her mother's dead body, and she gets upset with the reporter. And she tells Oz off about his job, and we get to a party, and Sophia bumps into Carla, and Oz tells Sophia her father wants to see her, and Carmine speaks with her about speaking to the press, and she is never supposed to speak to the press whatsoever, as he tells her to leave, and Oz will drive her home. And I love the acting between Kristen Milioti and Mark Strong, as this scene has tension right out the bat. Sophia is pissed at Oz and suddenly gets pulled over and arrested for the murder of Summer Gleason, and Carmine accuses her for her troubled past, as she is being called the hangman. And she goes to Arkham Asylum, no thanks to her lawyer, and Alberto tries to get her spirits up and strips her off her clothes. And the guards put her through therapy in Arkham Asylum, and this is a tragic backstory to begin with for the character of Sophia Falcone. And she meets Magpie, and I've never heard of this fucking character in the comic books. I swear to God, she looked like Harley Quinn. I'm not even going to lie to you there. As she gets tormented by the other prison mates, and Magpie saves Sophia's seat, and at one point gets picked on by Abby, who is a giant woman, and she gets the shit beat out of her, which was a brutal scene to watch. Sophia meets with the psychiatrist in Arkham about the incident, and she tells the doctor her father framed her for murder, and Sophia is handed a fork, to kill Abby, but she takes the fork from Sophia, and Abby stabs herself and it is putting a machine to make her sane, as she already feels is before entering Arkham, and peels off part of a wall. And they torture her until they say she's not innocent, while she's getting a visitor from Alberto, and tells her she's not getting a trial while people won't take her case. And she leaves the visitation and sticks around for the time being until she gets out of Arkham. And this is very tragic for me. I'm finding that story very tragic. Sophia beats up on Magpie and kills her, and Sophia gets drugged up, and we get back to current events on the morning after she learned Oz was the killer of Alberto, and Sophia wakes up at the psychiatrist's house, and he suggests to get on a plane to Sicily, Italy, and she wants his clothes, and she torments the psychiatrist. I think it's Julian. Like, they almost kiss, and we go back to the house, and Sophia comes in the room for dinner for Uncle Luca, as he speaks rather negative while Sophia says a few words and gets rough to the point she doesn't fit in the Falcone family anymore. And she prepares to start a new life without any of the motherfuckers who put her in Arkham and left her there in the first place. And Sophia gives Tia a slice of cake and eat it at the garden, as well as sleep in the garden until the next morning comes, and Sophia learns Tia and others did die from gasoline from closing the windows. And this episode felt the most tragic in my opinion. Oz and Victor burn the car and walk away and hitch a ride and see a TikTok of one of the Maroney kids and go after him. And I never got into TikTok in general. And they visit Sal to threaten his son, and Oz sees on the TV Sophia killed her family. And a Gotham police officer asks Sophia some questions to see if the death of the Falcone family is actually happening, as she tortures Johnny and Oz, and Victor goes to Eve's house to see the death of the Falcones and makes a big deal about how they never knew any of them, which was a hilarious speech. Johnny continues to get tortured by Sophia, and he wants to help her, while Victor checks up on Frances at her house and helps her up off the couch, and he confesses Oz has killed the Falcones, as Sophia took the bait on it, as Oz wants the Maroney boy back and burns the family up, which was a haunting image. While the scenes were well acted, Sal is prepared to go after Oz, telling him Mikey is dead. Excuse me. Oz tells Sal to call his wife and sees if she answers, while Sophia gets visited by Julian, the psychiatrist, and she goes to Johnny in a meeting as she tells everyone not to speak the name Carmine Falcone ever again, and eventually kills Johnny and pays them all a hell of a lot of money. And this is a menacing scene as it works tremendously. Victor hides Frances in a house in a dangerous neighborhood while she comments about how much she hates it here. And we learn that this was the house Victor grew up in, while Oz visits Eve, and he explains how the world is fucked. And Eve says she's not coming with him, and Sal hears something going down, and Sophia comes to Sal and points a fucking gun at him, and she wants to work together against Oz. And these scenes are rather interesting. Oz lies down with his mother, Frances, until she said get off, and Oz tells Victor he used to live in a place like this once. And Oz and Victor break into a place where they get to a hideout, and this episode ends there. as that was an interesting but good episode. They prepare for war against Sophia and the Maronis, and Oz believes they're going to tell stories about he and Victor while Sophia gets dressed and sees Sal, and they make a meal together while Sophia never pictured Sal as a cook, and they eat dinner together while the dialogue in this scene was well shot, well acted by Clancy Brown and Kristen Milioti, and well directed by as they prepare for war against Oz. Oz puts on some music, and as it breaks apart, and Francis is starting to like Victor and says he's a good boy. And I took it in a racial way at first, but she meant it as a compliment, I'll say it best. And Francis comes off disrespectful to Oz, and the news comes up as there's some deaths. And this show does a great job at making the plot feel not very comic book, despite this is based on a DC comic book, while Oz makes an announcement and puts people to work as Victor bumps into his old friend Squid as he's welcomed back in the neighborhood while Sophia and Sal look for Oz in his apartment and smash his shit up and look for something to threaten Oz with. Well, and Sophia finds a photograph of Eve hidden in a drawer as Oz finds his mother in a cold, very cold bath, I'll say, and gets her out of there while Francis is having a meltdown. And Deirdre O'Connell, despite I've seen her in a few things and reviewed her before in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, for example, she's very good in this role, as this is a better relationship than what was in Batman Returns, where she and her father had him tragically thrown into a river. Oz puts makeup on Francis while Victor tells Oz about Squid and being in the neighborhood and wants to join them on their mission while Oz tries to fix the generator and to keep the heat on. And Sophia looks for Eve and spots Roxy and gives Eve up as Oz goes up to a councilman and tortures him and give him anything he wants. And this is a great mob show. Victor tells Squid Oz isn't looking for anyone to work for him, and Squid says to Victor take him to his boss, who happens to be Oz, and suddenly Victor shoots Squid dead, and Sophia gets to Eve's apartment and barges in with a gun and talk as she brought up the name of the people that were brought up at one point in episode 4. But she doesn't do a goddamn thing except give up Oz and where he's at. And this show is getting so fucking good at this point. Victor gets back to Oz and explains why he had to kill Squid, and Oz tells them he did the right thing and wants him back at the house with Francis while Oz makes a deal with the mobsters as he gives them some beers and monologues about how Sal runs the city and how they are nobody, and they reluctantly have a drink of beer and Victor sees his foot is bleeding, and the power goes back on, and he dances with Francis until Sophia comes in and kidnaps Victor and Francis, as I wanted to see what was going to happen, as that was so gripping. We open the next episode with a young Oz and Francis with two of his younger brothers, as Oz, Benny, and Jack take a walk and bump into Rex, who's a mobster, giving Jack some money, and it starts to rain and gets in a place to find a hiding spot and play hide and seek, trapping them in a sewer, and walks back home to be with Francis and watch a very old movie while Jack and Benny get stuck in the sewer, which was a better origin story of the Penguin than in Batman Returns. Oz gets home and Francis has been kidnapped, and Victor says it was Sophia who took her and gets Victor the fuck out of there as Sal and his men barge and beat up on Oz and calls Sophia telling her they got Oz and are going to bring him to her while she made breakfast for Francis and interrogates her about where Oz is at. And these are powerful scenes as they're powerfully acted. Sal attacks Oz's gang and takes over them, and Oz fights back with Sal to take his gang back, and all of a sudden has a motherfucking heart attack and dies, and Oz just shoots him till he's not breathing, which has got me to be the corniest death in the whole goddamn show. Sophia goes back to Arkham Asylum and sees Tia, who doesn't want to speak to Sophia, and Sophia treats her the same way the doctors did back when she was in Arkham. And she said her mother and father were bad people, and they were better off dead, and she deserves better than what her family has to offer. And she leaves and gets a call from Oz, and he says he'll give her everything if she returns his mother. And we flash back to Sophia going into Julian's office and tells him she'll accept despite she knows it's a trap. Then why the fuck would she walk into a trap like a snap of a finger? And she can't breathe because she's afraid while she wants to be free and Oz to feel real pain, while Oz is prepared for a black car to come to Oz, while he has an army with him. As the car gets closer to him and while on the phone with Sophia, and she's playing a new game where she gives him a present that is a bomb and gets everyone the fuck out of there. As the car blows up, and Oz, as a boy, sees Francis dressed up as he gets dressed, and they go to the Monroes, and they dance as Oz gets up and goes to war with Sophia, and he's taken to her, and I thought, oh shit. And this is an ending that's going to be very interesting to lead up to the final episode, as I was on the edge of my seat at this point. Frances is hospitalized at home as she wakes up, and Rex visits her at the apartment, and they talk about what Oz did to Jack and Benny. She is afraid to face of the fact Oz is a needy as a kid, and this conversation was a tad melodramatic, and decides to take Oz to Monroe's like we saw in the previous episode. But Oz tells Frances he'll get a job, and she doesn't believe in him to get a job and to prove himself as a man, which was beautifully acted by the kid who was playing a younger version of Oz. Victor looks for Oz while the gangs walk away, and Oz and Victor calls them a bunch of fucking cowards, and Victor goes back without the cowards, and Oz wakes up in Monroe's in a hostage situation between him and Frances against Sophia, as she monologues about the mama bird and the baby bird. And when Oz did what he did to Benny and Jack, and the mama bird did nothing about it, which is something Frances did, which is absolutely nothing, which is a terrible story, but it's acted well by Sophia. And Sophia tells Frances how she's angry with Oz, and Julian almost cuts off Frances's right pinky finger, which is a scene that was a little graphic, but not too much. And Frances knows what Oz did to Jack and Benny, and she says she hates him for that reason alone, as that was a serious thing to do in the first place, to be fair. And she says he's a giant disappointment, and stabs him in the stomach, calling him the devil. Excuse me, which is a very sad torture scene, in my opinion. Jack and Benny appear in Frances's mind, and she falls and faints, and Oz shoots Julian, the other bodyguard, and Sophia, as they go outside, and they shoot the guy, putting contacts in his eyes, which I had to look away because I have a phobia of eyeballs in general, so that scared the shit out of me. And Oz takes Frances to the hospital while Victor looks for Oz, until Oz calls Victor and tells him he's in the hospital. And Oz heals himself back together. And this was another scene that was absolutely fucking painful to watch. Sophia calls in the mob and asks who wants to control Gotham, as she doesn't have anything in the city anymore, and will give it to anyone who finds Oz first. And Oz walks into a courthouse and meets with the councilman, while Victor gets a call from Link saying where he's at, and I'm believing he's bullshitting him in order to kill him, and confesses there were drugs and where the big hole is in the explosion is at, and gives him someone to hate versus someone to love. And I like the scene for the shots in the courtroom, and I believe we get the mayor from Gotham that was in The Batman in that scene, as Oz sees she's there while Victor is kidnapped and takes Oz to Sophia. And I knew he was bullshitting Victor at this point, while Sophia burns down the Falcone house and smiles rather menacingly about it. And that was a great shot of her being a menacing person as she is as a villain. Link brings Oz to Sophia at the airport, and Oz and Victor break out with Link and his gang to take Sophia for a ride, and she tries to find a way to escape Oz, monologuing, and we see the death of every single gangster they were dealing with. And Oz and Sophia arrive at their location and tells her to turn around while she says she'll never love him. Well, he says she'll go to hell and points the gun at Sophia, and he takes off and disappears like Batman usually would do and gives her to the Gotham police, and that was quite a relief for a Batman villain. Oz comes back to the hospital and almost celebrates until she passed away from a stroke. And they couldn't find a way to reach Oz while Victor is here for Oz. And they go outside and he asks if she could ever forgive him while Victor doesn't know the whole goddamn story, which feels pretty irritating. But Victor says to Oz thanks for bringing him in, then as Oz made him feel like family. And Oz unfortunately suffocates Victor and kills him. And I can't believe Oz had to kill Victor like a snap of a fucking finger. But remember, he is a Batman villain after all, and throws Victor's ID card in the river, and Sophia is back at Arkham Asylum, but this time, she's not that innocent, and she gets a note written to her by her half-sister, Selena Kyle, and because remember, she was Carmine Falcone's half-daughter in The Batman, and Oz goes to an apartment looking like he did in Batman the Animated Series, and he has his mother in the apartment as he imagines his mother being alive, and he asks, did he deliver? Or, well, he did deliver. As Gotham belongs to Oz, aka the Penguin, until the Batman Part 2 comes out. And we'll have a fight between those two, possibly. I don't know what the plot of it is yet. And the final episode was good, but it wasn't as the kick-ass episode I was expecting, as I was disappointed. But I liked the show. And do I like it enough? As much as the Batman? Let's find out in the rating. I'll give this show a 8.4 out of 10. Colin Farrell gives one of his best performances as Oz, aka the Penguin, while Kristen Milioti is the standout of the show, as she's the best character in my opinion, as her performance was terrific, and the performances by every single actor is tremendous in the show. Is incredibly intense, and it can get violent for damn sure, as it makes interesting choices. The cinematography was great to watch, but there were times that it went shaky cam, and I thought, hold the fucking camera still, please. While they always end each episode with a cliffhanger, where it keeps you hooked, and that's a smart choice for a TV miniseries, and it hooks you big time. There were times the show was hard to watch, particularly in episode 4, as it was all about the origin of Sophia Falcone. And is this as good as The Batman? No, but it's a great spin-off of that movie. And this is a solid recommendation for this show, as this is, in my opinion, a better telling of a female villain, and any villain for that matter, than Agatha all along, in my opinion, as this was better told and less confusing in my opinion. So I'd like to thank you guys for returning with me to the Batman retrospective, and until then, the Penguin's got a fight coming for him because I'm Batman.